For those of you who knew Mike Jaharis, he was just a truly extraordinary individual. I've got to say, in Washington, you get an opportunity to meet kings and presidents and prime ministers, but nobody that I met surpassed Mike Jaharis in terms of his success in all aspects of his life. Success in business is obvious to those who knew him. Success in his church, he literally converted our church over the last 20 years to be in a very effective governing body, and success in his family. Mike was truly an extraordinary person. When we considered years ago creating the Washington Orchidee Foundation, Father Alex Carlutzis, who George mentioned, was very encouraging. And Father Alex is one of the brightest people in our community. But we wanted to make sure it made sense, so we went to one of the other very brightest people in our community, Mike Jaharis in New York. And Mike encouraged us to continue and to do this. And I've got to say, his words of encouragement were very successful. Mike passed away just recently, and there's little you can do to thank a person after that. But in his honor, we created the Mike Jaharis Award for an individual who's not only extraordinary in the Greek American community, but served his country in Korea. And this year we have an excellent recipient, and I would like to call Elaine Jaharis to the microphone to introduce him. Elaine?
Your Excellencies, members of the military, Senator Hirono, honorees and friends, I'm honored to be here today representing our family. On behalf of the Jaharis family, I wish to extend our sincere gratitude to Andy Manitas and Mike Manitas for establishing this important annual Orchidee celebration commemorating the courageous heroes who bravely fought to defend freedom, democracy, and human rights during World War II, and celebrate our contemporary heroes who represent these values and valor today. I also wish to express our family's deep gratitude to Andy and Mike for establishing this very meaningful award to commemorate the memory and philanthropic legacy of Michael Jaharis. The Michael Jaharis Service Award celebrates the life and legacy of Michael Jaharis by recognizing an individual for their dedicated service during the Korean War, as well as the recipient's contributions in the spirit of Michael Jaharis to the Greek American community, the United States, and to the world. Anyone who knew Michael Jaharis knows that he truly embodied and was a champion of the values of Orchidee celebrates: courage, heroism, and always standing up for what is right, especially in upholding freedom and democracy. The proud Hellene, Mr. Jaharis recognized the importance of the Orchidee Foundation and the modern-day need to celebrate and promote these values by educating our policymakers and the public, young and old, in the U.S. and abroad, about the profound role Greece played in bringing about the victory in World War II, and also the importance of the strong U.S.-Greek ties today, and above all, the significance of celebrating the heroes who carry forth this tradition of values. While we miss his presence, the tremendous legacy of his good deeds and life's work remain with us. This year's award is especially meaningful to the Jaharis family in that it is being presented to Peter Vlachos, who was a very close friend of Michael Jaharis and is a cherished friend of our family. Peter Austin Vlachos, a native New Yorker born in New York City's Morningside Heights neighborhood. His father, Emmanuel Vlachos, immigrated to America in 1910 from Hydra, Greece, and voluntarily joined the U.S. Army, serving in France during World War I. Peter's mother's family lived in America for several generations. It should be noted that from very early on in his life, Peter's intelligence, hard work, and integrity distinguished him amongst his peer group. He was admitted to and attended Stuyvesant High School, but was then, and still remains today, as one of the most competitive and selective public high schools in New York and in all of the U.S. Peter Vlachos volunteered to serve his country during the Korean War as soon as he turned 17. During his basic training in Biloxi, Mississippi, Peter's high intellectual aptitude, hard work, trustworthiness and integrity once again distinguished him among his peer group. After scoring highly on several evaluations and tests, Peter was selected to be part of an elite brain power group who would go through an intensive Air Force engineering training program, which covered specialized training in radar and computer navigation programs, aerial refueling, and other highly complicated and innovative technical responsibilities. Upon successful completion of the program, Peter was transferred to the Castle Air Force Base in California, where he went on to serve in the 93rd Bomb Wing of the Air Force Strategic Air Command and flew in the 328th Bomb Squadron as a radar bombing and navigational technician. After the war, Peter attended and graduated from Colby College in Waterville, Maine in 1958. He worked on Wall Street at Amont, the Dreyfus Corporation, and Neuberger Berman, and in 1989 founded Austin Investment Management, Inc. In 2016, Vlachos helped establish and joined Adalta Capital Management, LLC, where he is a managing director. Over his career, Peter has served and continues to actively, selflessly, and quietly serve on numerous nonprofit organizations in varying capacities. A lifelong supporter of the arts, humanitarian causes, and above all, a strong advocate for children's and young adults' education, Peter has served on the boards and the investment committees of Colby College, Outward Bond, Scenic Hudson, Metropolitan Montessori School, Hannock, Inc., and the School for Strings. Peter's personal experiences growing up in an inner-city neighborhood, along with his passion for helping others, make him an inspirational mentor and advocate for young people who may not come from privileged backgrounds. Through his volunteer work, he helps inspire and encourage people to seek out the best possible educational opportunities. As part of his strong commitment to his Hellenic heritage and the Greek American community, Peter has served on the Archdiocesan Council of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, and he continues to altruistically serve as Treasurer of Faith and Endowment for Orthodoxy and Hellenism, Vice President of the American Associates of St. Catherine Foundation, and Chairman of the Investment Committee of the Archbishop Jacobus Leadership 100 Endowment Fund. Peter, I know that your friendship with my father-in-law spans decades, and that in your various volunteer roles, you and my beloved father-in-law worked together diligently with great effort and with deep admiration, trust, and respect for one another to foster and promote Hellenism and support the Greek Orthodox faith for future generations, as well as many other noble causes. What is not well known is that Peter also has an incredibly close relationship with my mother-in-law, Mary. Peter is Mary's godson. Peter, you are an unsung hero in our community. You really are. Whether it was under the most challenging circumstances of his service to our country, or in the realm of his professional success, or through his active volunteer and leadership roles in many charitable organizations, Peter's character has consistently displayed extraordinary levels of integrity, intellectual acumen, valor, and trustworthiness. It is with great pleasure that I present this award on behalf of the Jaharis family to Peter Vlachos for his heroism and service to his country, for his altruistic dedication and work promoting the values of freedom and democracy, and his leadership to the Hellenic American community. Axios.
Elaine, thank you so much for that introduction. I think all those who knew Mike Jaharis, and for the record, Mary Jaharis, know that when you meet them, you're in a special environment, that you know you're in the presence of integrity and charity. Charity meaning not only the giving, but the love. let's see. This is a wonderful occasion, and I thank all those who were involved in arranging it for me to be here. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by just getting into remarks, and they're a little wide-ranging, but I thought much about our heritage here in the United States, the Greek heritage, and what we hope to stand for in future. And I'd like to start by saying, although remote in time, the democratic Athenian city-state's victory in the Battle of Marathon and Salamis against the overwhelming might of the autocratic Persian Empire has rippled across these many centuries as prime examples of the valor and patriotism of people to prevail against tyranny. The history of the 20th century provides clear examples of that heritage of these ancient episodes. One such outstanding example we celebrate today. On October 28, 1940, the Italian fascist army of Mussolini was poised at Greece's border. Smug in his belief of certain and swift victory, Mussolini requested, in a thinly disguised threat of war, to enter Greece on his way to subdue Ethiopia and other mischief in Africa. The request and threat was answered with the now famous reply that astounded the world. Okay, no. And I know that those of us old enough to remember that this really took the world and made by surprise, and certainly the prestige of Greece and honor of Greece was elevated greatly. I remember going to the movies where the hat, essentially a cardboard box, was passed around to aid Greece. I mean, that was taking place in many movie houses across the country. Unaware of the humiliating defeat that lay ahead, Mussolini's forces invaded Greece. By April of 1941, the Italians had been soundly defeated and pushed back over the other side of Greece's border. So ended the Greco-Italian War. Hitler was reported to have become infuriated with his allies' venture and humiliating defeat at the hands of the Greek army. Hitler then, as referred to before, Hitler then came to the aid of Mussolini to regain fascism's image as an undeniable force. He employed military units to finish what Mussolini could not, the occupation of Greece. And that's what Andy Manitos referred to before. Those units were deployed away from the Russian assault. Notwithstanding Greece's defeat against Nazi Germany, the worldwide admiration for its heroic stand was overwhelming. Another example during the Second World War was to take place in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium. The American forces in Bastion, Belgium, in December 1944, the 101st Airborne Division and the Infantry 30th Division took heavy losses and were under threat of annihilation. The military command of the German units presented surrender terms to the 101st Airborne Division, which was then under the command of General Tony McAuliffe. He gave the now famous reply of nuts, equivalent to hockey. The Germans did not know how to interpret this, and Colonel Harper translated for them and said, in plain English, it means go to hell. Soon after the Second World War, Greece found itself in the grip of a terrible civil war. This time, the battle was against the totalitarianism of communism. Again, inspired the desire to live happily and under a constitutional democracy, the Greek Democratic Army defeated the communists on the battlefield. To my knowledge, Greece is the only country to have defeated fascism and communism in the field of battle. Less than 5 years after the end of the World War II, America and the United Nations were confronted with hostilities in the Korean Peninsula. On June 25th, Communist North Korea armed forces crossed the 38th parallel into South Korea. At the time, I was stationed at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, participating in an intensive course in electronics navigation and bombing technology. Upon completion, I was assigned to the 93rd Bomb Wing at Castle Air Force Base in California. A short time after arrival, we began the process of preparing for overseas duty in Korea. The process entailed going from table to table, answering and reviewing and answering questions such as who was your next of kin, your blood type, made sure it was on your dog tag, and things like that. And when, near the end, was the chaplain's desk. There was a major who had noted that I claimed to be a Christian, but never baptized. He asked if I attended church services. I said, yes, I attended a Presbyterian church growing up. He smiled and said, well, I'm an ordained Presbyterian minister, and where you are going, don't you think you should be baptized? And his being a major and I a corporal, I said, yes, sir. So that's how I became my first baptism. As luck would have it, I was assigned to the 41st 15th Armament and Electronics Squadron, attached to the atomic bomber unit that consisted of the 328th, 329th, and 330th bomb squadrons. President Truman had, at about that time, decided to prohibit the use of atomic weapons in Korea, and therefore I did not find myself in Korea. The North Korean assault inflicted heavy casualties on the American troops that were stationed there and the Royal Korean forces and many, many civilians. Unfortunately, in the early stages of that war, those who have fallen in battle, their next of kin, their mothers or fathers, whoever the recipients of their insurance, they couldn't collect because at first it was determined this was not a war, it was a police action. But Harry Truman and the administration cleared that up. But it did take a toll initially. Oh, shit. Here. Like many of my friends from Washington Heights in New York City, I volunteered for the military at the age of 17. We found ourselves attached to the different branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, etc., Marines, and several of them served as paratroopers in the 187th Regimental Combat Team. Excuse me. This regimental combat team distinguished itself in action in Korea. They made 2 drops behind the North Korean lines at Incheon, which is a very famous military action designed by General MacArthur to encircle the North Koreans. It was successful but bloody. A number of my friends fought in that battle. One, Richard Van Ward, was bayoneted. Another, Ted McCormick, lost his life in that, and so on. One of my best friends, John Haggerty, was wounded, not in that battle, but subsequently, and led a good life afterward and became my son's godfather. Another very close friend, John Exusian, also served in the 187th Regimental Combat Team as a machine gunner. And like John Haggerty, earned the Army's Infantry Combat Badge, which I know George is also wearing right here, the Combat Infantry Badge. He too returned home in one piece and led a good life, but unfortunately died at the age of 29 of cancer. To reflect on the wars our country has undertaken since its founding in 1776, one comes to the question, what inspired those that serve in the military to carry out their assignment with courage and sacrifice? For sure, there's no one answer. The answer for some, I think, is that when you enter the military, you take the oath to protect the Constitution and country against all enemies whomsoever. I believe this act or pledge has a great influence on the men and women in the military. The American Constitution is one of the greatest instruments of freedom ever written. There are many beautiful aspects to it. One is the Bill of Rights, that because they are stated to be inalienable rights given to us by our Creator, no government, law, no legislation, nothing can annul that or amend it. Another aspect of the greatness of it is that it employs the negative phrase, Congress shall make no law. Today, for us today, I think the First Amendment has special meaning. It states simply, Congress shall make no law restricting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. To emphasize the power of the negative phrasing, the author Floyd Abrams, in his recent published book, The Soul of the First Amendment, asks us to think what we could have had if it had been written as, quotation, citizens are guaranteed freedom of speech, of assembly, demonstration, and association. I'm sure it'll surprise you that that is a direct quote from the words of Article 67 of the Constitution of North Korea. Can we imagine trusting the North Korean government's assurances for us to say what we think at any time? I think not. Standing here, standing here in this most moving place, I think of the bereaved, of the loved ones of those who fell in battle. Words of condolence do not come easy if they are sincere. Some, like President Lincoln, managed to do so. Writing to a mother who lost several sons in the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, inspired by the then current situation, wrote, I pray that our Heavenly Father may assuage the anguish of your bereavement and leave you only the cherished memory of the loved and lost, and the solemn pride that must be yours to have laid so costly a sacrifice upon the altar of freedom. Those are touching and meaningful words to hear in this setting, as would our silence and our tears. Thank you.